Alecia Staines has run some of Australia's biggest maternity campaigns, including the Bush Baby campaign. She is passionate about women having access to local maternity services. As a result of some of her campaigning, she's had governments direct over $100 million into maternity services in the last 12 months. Her organisation helped set up the New South Wales Birth Trauma Inquiry, and she regularly provides advice and submissions to government on how to improve maternity services for women. Alecia and your little friend, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Alecia, Maternity Consumer Network. I love to talk maternity issues. I often say it's the feminist issue that has been forgotten. Back in, I guess, to give you a little bit of history for those that are unfamiliar with why the maternity system is such a problem and so violent to women, back in 2010, we actually had a landmark global review and research into the violence and disrespect against women in childbirth by Bowser and Hill that actually gave rise to the Respectful Maternity Care Charter. I will quickly go through basically the categories of disrespect. So there was a continuum from basically verbal abuse right up to physical abuse and detainment in facilities. I guess the biggest thing that we see in the maternity setting in Australia is a lot of coercion, a lot of non-consented care. What the Bowser and Hill report did was actually gave rise to what we know is now the Respectful Maternity Care Charter. That was put out by White Ribbon Alliance, and they outlined 7 basically rights that women have. And that was underpinned by basically international law around human rights. So freedom from harm, right to information, informed consent and refusal, respect of choices, confidentiality, privacy, dignity, respect, equality, freedom from discrimination, right to timely health care, the right to highest attainable care, autonomy, self-determination, and freedom from coercion. Though 13 years on, we've not seen a lot of that. I would say, if anything, that our maternity system has certainly got more violent and more disrespectful in this country. We know it's a form of gender-based violence. In 2019, the UN had flagged it as an issue, as an international issue, but Australia certainly isn't immune from it. Basically, the UN had said the violence and disrespect against women in society has infiltrated the birth suite. The problem is that it is often sanctioned abuse, and women have very few avenues to basically get any kind of retribution for their abuse and mistreatment. The common themes for the New South Wales Birth Trauma Inquiry, so they had over 4,000 submissions. As an organisation, because the parliamentary submissions are quite difficult for women, particularly those coming from a non-English speaking background, those with, I guess, low political literacy, and those websites are quite clunky, we actually converted the terms of reference into a jot form and helped the committee that way. And we had over 700 submissions alone. In that cohort of women, over 67% had said that they had not consented to procedures, which is quite significant. And we know that if this had occurred in the car park, it would constitute assault. But it's not seen as assault in the maternity setting. There is the prioritisation of the fetus over the mother, even though that we know the fetus actually doesn't have rights. And we've got an increase in termination access for women, but it seems to be there are still huge cultural barriers to overcome, as the woman being seen as a mere vessel to carry a baby. So the Birth Trauma Inquiry, what we also saw overall, the common themes were exactly what we're seeing in almost every lot of research done since that 2010 landmark report is violent, disrespectful care and lack of informed consent. It also looked at, yes, it also looked at obstetric violence. So now we have an internationally recognised term called obstetric violence, which is the gender-based violence in the maternity setting. And basically all the things that I've mentioned, from the coercion and verbal abuse right up to the physical abuse, comes under that umbrella term for obstetric violence. Interestingly, that New South Wales birth trauma inquiry, as far as I'm aware, is the first internationally, but the UK has followed suit. We were lucky that we didn't lose gendered language in the inquiry, which is almost, I don't know, a unicorn, because I see the loss of women happening, the word woman happening in this space quite a lot as well. During COVID, so there was a birth experience study, which is the biggest study that we've seen in the country around capturing women's experience. There was 8,800 women, and that was from a range of backgrounds. That study and survey was translated into other languages as well. The common themes of comments from that birth experience study were dehumanised, powerless, and violated. So unfortunately, that is the way women are starting their experience of motherhood. We know also, so that data was the same as what we've seen over many years of any data capturing, that 1/3 of women experience birth trauma, which is about 100,000 women a year. So as far as mental health in that perinatal period, trauma has now overtaken postnatal depression and anxiety. Now, so some of the ways in which women were actually asked about their experience was using the Respectful Maternity Care Charter. So consumers, we're not even doing this well in this country compared to places like the US and Canada, who seem to be well and truly ahead in collecting women's experiences. But we have from there that could be used in Australia, because it is validated, is a mistreatment index. So it actually aligns with those 7 categories of disrespect and corresponding rights for women. We also know that there's a Mothers on Respect index that looked at how the woman basically, was she comfortable asking questions, was she not gaslit and things like that, and also autonomy in decision making. What I find interesting is that there is no state, territory, or even federal government interested in collecting women's experience. So basically, they know that we have huge rates of trauma, huge rates of disrespect and abuse, and they are not interested in collecting this data at hospital level. So we will continue to have to rely on independent research and funding to collate and collect women's experience. But 8,800 women, it is quite a decent sized study. But if we look at all birthing women in Australia each year, it's 300,000. So even since this study, we've had 1 million women birth, and we're just collecting basically a drop in the ocean. So that's about it for the maternity setting. It's pretty grim, unfortunately. It's, like I said, I often think it's the issue that feminists have forgotten, but at least we did get a birth trauma inquiry. There are about 42 recommendations that I reckon are going to collect dust unless we start banging on Health Minister Ryan Parker's door.
Thank you, and thank you to your helper. So lovely to see her.
The boob monster.
Lovely. How wonderful. I love having a boob monster on the show.